of the 3 forms of happiness as proposed by Martin Seligman. And Martin Seligman is the founder of positive psychology, and he's a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania. And he was president of the American Psychological Association for I don't know how long, but anyway, highly credentialed fellow. And he's one of the people who changed the paradigm, part of the paradigm shift in psychology from the old school, we know better, you fit this model, this is how we're going to treat you, to what kind of wonderful resources do you have within you that are sleeping, that we need to help wake up, like gratitude and enjoyment of life and wonder and awe and connection, and as a way to balance out our nervous system. And a lot of times we have that medicine within us already. It goes back to Hippocrates said the greatest physician is the physician within. And so psychology started to include things like MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is mobilizing the internal resources. And Carl Rogers, same thing. And so Martin Seligman has some really interesting things to say about happiness. And the talk that's listed, the link in the email I sent, first part of it, he talks about the general state of psychology from his point of view. And what I'm describing is old school. He talks about that and the limitations of it. He doesn't criticize it or anything, but it can only take us so far. And we need more healing than that paradigm can give, basically. And then he talked about the 3 forms of happiness. They did this really big study on happiness. Now, when he started, back in the 80s, when he proposed to start his research on happiness, because he realized there wasn't anything there in the literature at all, very, very little. And what was there was fuzzy constructs. His peers laughed at him and said, "You can't study this fuzzy thing. You can't, what are you going to do?" So, but he went ahead and did that. And the study he talks about in the TED Talk is a study where he found that there were 3 basic categories. And when people describe a sense of happiness or connection, whatever, there was 3 basic categories. One was hedonic happiness, meaning things that are pertaining to the physical body and connection and a good meal with friends or a walk in the woods or whatever it is, hanging out with relatives, loved ones. Second is what he calls flow. And flow is our connection with the world, meaning what we do in the world, whether we're an artist or a machinist or we're an influencer, whatever it is, it's our work, basically. And that's our relationship with the world. And the third is what he called the search for meaning. And he very wisely, in my opinion, made it a completely non-denominational, non-religious concept. Because really it is. Basically, how many people, what he was referring to is becoming aware of a much larger, the much larger reality in which we live. And continuing to search for meaning and accrue more meaning in our life. So he's talking about the meaningful life as really what we're all aspiring to. So in that way, he averts the controversy around the word happiness and puts it on the basis of that meaning is the real currency that we're after as human beings. The discontent is the absence of meaning. So how many times have we or had friends and have a very difficult situation occur and they go, why does this happen? Right? That means they don't see the meaning in it. We don't see the meaning in it. And so that produces suffering. If we go along and we do these sorts of practices, we begin to see perhaps what kind of meaning it has. And maybe sometimes that meaning doesn't really appear for 10, 15, 20 years. But we look back and say, oh, that's why I needed that. So we grow in meaning. So it can be existential meaning, like spiritual aspirations, or it could just be a meaningful life, doing something very meaningful. And feeling enriched by the process of life, whether it's so-called positive or negative. But the punchline on that is, and he says this in his talk, the thing that surprised them was the fact that with hedonic happiness, somebody was a sense of happiness, or whatever you want to call it, happiness in life was situated primarily in the physical body, then that's all they got. This, whatever they're doing to be happy based on physical body. Second is, if somebody's happiness was based on flow, like how many people we do who just love their job, and if they could, they'd work 24 hours a day, and that sort of thing. And they, if their satisfaction in life is based mostly on on flow, on the work that they do, then that's all they get. If someone's life is based on finding meaning in life, and based on the search for meaning, then in other words, meaning that, implying that it's not a one-stop effort, it's an ongoing effort to understand more and gain more meaning from life. He said what surprised them was that the people who were primary in their primary source of life satisfaction strategy was finding meaning in life, they got all three forms of happiness, which I thought is brilliant. Because we tend toward morality a lot. Somebody who's really involved in flow, we call them workaholics. And if somebody's primarily a hedonistic life, we tend to have a lot of moral values around that, but that's not really the problem. Their problem is ignorance. Not that they're bad or wrong or stupid or vile, that sort of thing. They're just trying really, 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 really hard to get some sort of satisfaction out of the physical life. And it's never going to work. It's never going to provide the meaning that they're looking for. And so I think that's really important in the sense that all this judgmentalism that we have, particularly around sex and relationships, and it's like, that's not the point. We get moralistic about it. We've lost our way, in my opinion. The fact is that they're trying to achieve satisfaction out of something that will never provide it. Talk to any recovering or recovered alcoholic. It's like, they'll tell you the story. They tried to find this satisfaction in life, and bottle or drug or sex or food or gambling or whatever it is, and it never worked. And they had to get to the very end before they were starting to say, okay. And once they say okay, they get into recovery, and then they start finding meaning in life, they start connecting with other people, and they start on the path of the search for meaning. And that's really kind of what recovery is about. And I think it's really important. I've said before, once we judge someone, or they're a fool, or they're a bad person, or they're this or whatever, we we cease to be able to understand them. It's like this is one of the first things we were taught as therapists. If you have a judgment value about your client, refer them to somebody else, because you're not going to make any headway. If you feel that person is wrong or bad, forget it. And so we tend to label people. And when we do that, we will never understand them as long as we're labeling them. So to me, that's one of the really great gifts of what of this research, of Seligman's research, is that judgment has no place in psychology or spirituality. And it says, well, basically in the particularly in the Buddhist traditions, it's so non-judgmental, and that I remember once I had lunch with this Tibetan teacher, and he was talking about there was something going on in his sangha that the sangha members were really upset about, and they wanted him to say, "Can you please fix this?" He said, "No." Basically, he said, "No, this is your problem. You have to solve this. I'm not going to." In other words, he didn't want to play the fix-it guy in the knight in shining armor or anything like that to them. He said, "No, these are your issues. You need to fix them." And so that's what they did. And so, but if he were to judge or they were to judge, the problem is that they're judging. It's probably, I don't know exactly what the issue was. The problem is probably that they were judging each other or someone judging someone else. And particularly that first mode, the hedonic happiness, is just another form of ignorance, as is flow. And flow is actually prized. Young lawyers, when they get hired in a big firm, they're working 90 hours a week, at least. And that's sort of the weeding out process. But that's valued, and lawyers, I've known lawyers, even lawyers who've been around a while, if they have a big case, they're working 90 hours, 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week. And that's considered, that's looked up to as a noble thing to do, work that many hours, self-sacrifice and all that. But they're just sacrificing their own being is what they're sacrificing. That's not really anyway, that goes off on another track, but you get the idea. And so I thought, talking about that today and talking about how that applies to our own aspirations, I think might be really important. Because I find myself frequently attempting to stand outside of what I'm doing and take a look and ask myself, what is my motivation here, really? And when I do that, sometimes I hear like, you're trying to fix something. Well, okay, so I need to take a look at that, and why do I feel that way? Or I'm in the beginning I was trying to make up for lost time. Well, that doesn't work either. So any of those motivations don't really work. It's just the pure, simple search for meaning that provides us a sense of order and contentment in life. So it's about taking a look at those things and self-reflection and seeing if we need to make any adjustments there. So I guess during the we're going to do a mindfulness practice as usual, and then a brief self-compassion or compassion exercise, and we'll see what comes up. And the last thing I'll say on all that, if we have any judgment or ulterior motive, it diminishes our ability to have the experience that we're really looking for. because it's the ego that's involved. I have an idea, this is what's going to make me enlightened, that's going to be the obstacle. So the practice, the wisest teachers say, just practice. Well, what about this? And what about that? How about it? Just practice. Well, but this was happening in my... Just practice. And because after a while, we'll get tired of our own nonsense. We'll realize it and we'll get tired of it and discard it. So we just keep practicing. And whatever that practice may be. Okay, so prepare for takeoff. There's a really good friend of mine. I was taking care of the registration at a retreat or teaching or something. And I had never met him before, but he signed up and I handed him the ticket and I said, ready for takeoff. And he reminds me of that every once in a while. So anyway, so finding a comfortable spot, comfortable place, and we'll begin. And allowing ourselves just to settle in a little bit is to let our doing processes take a break. Unplugging. Allowing our thoughts just to settle down like a snow globe. All aflutter. We just let it be for a while. It'll all settle down. And remembering that when a thought or a feeling comes up, just to recognize it and let it go as best you can and come back to the present moment. And over and over and over again. So it's not about what arises, because that we can't stop, but it is about how we respond to what arises. And you may notice that when we let go of a thought or a feeling, it just disappears, wanders off and disappears. So it's about our awareness of what's going on in our mind. Not achieving anything or clearing our mind or any of that. Just resting in ease, settling in ease into the present moment. And allowing our bodies to settle down. which it does naturally when we allow it to do so. And when we become aware that our mind has wandered, just recognizing the mind has wandered, and without criticism or condemnation, to bring our awareness back to where we're sitting, to our home base, our body, which exists in time and space. Allowing ourselves to let the day fall away. Hopes and fears fall away. Just settling. And with all this, noticing perhaps a sense of kindness to oneself as we do this. We do a lot of good work out in the world, and sometimes we need to simply stop and just be for a while. Noticing any tension, letting it flow out, flow away. And just continue to settle in the moment. Being aware of what goes on in our mind field. Some feel a sense of relief or just enjoying the quiet. And the kindness to ourselves of the very act of sitting. letting go of whatever arises. And into this space, letting compassion flow in. Whether it arrives as a feeling, or sound, or light, however it arrives, accepting it and inviting it into this space of emptiness. And allowing it to fill the space like light would fill an empty room. And with this, getting a sense of how it feels to be filled with compassion. And whatever arises of the mind, simply letting it go as you notice it and returning to this space. The space filled with love, compassion, wonder. And whatever positive feelings arise. Like those qualities have been there all along, we just haven't noticed them that much. And as this field fills up with compassion, bringing to mind compassion for oneself or another, or perhaps in need of compassion from someone else, from others. Perhaps wishing for others they could have what we're experiencing right here, right now, and they do not. Or someone we care about, who we can see when we step back that they're really creating their own unhappiness. Or people who feel they could be more of a great person by exerting power and control over others. They also are spiritually sick. And bringing this light to ourselves or others, or receiving from others, however it manifests. And perhaps realizing there's plenty of compassion to go around. This inexhaustible resource. And we may notice that the more attention we pay to this space, the more defined and palpable it becomes, and at the same time elusive. And perhaps realizing at some point that when we rightly relate ourselves to this space, it flows without hesitation. And coming to rest in the space and letting it be and letting ourselves be. Absorbing and reflecting at the same time. And knowing, or at least having a suspicion, that this space exists for us, can exist for us at any time. All we have to do is settle down, ease into it, and pay attention. And as we absorb this experience as best we can, letting the body soak it up, like water being absorbed by a sponge, letting it settle into the body. So that when the bell rings again, you can bring this with you as you go about your day. And come back to it at any time.